and welcome to the third webinar in Water Addressing the Global Crisis. Unfortunately, Dr. Angela Ortigara was not able to connect. She's having some technical issues, but we have Dr. David Coates here, and you're not very familiar with him, but he's an expert, and I'm sure he can answer all of your burning questions. You know, welcome everybody. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for David, and let's just keep our questions brief. I know that in our previous webinars, we've had some questions where they were very long, and if you don't keep it within the 2 characters word limit, it will be very hard for me to see how the question is connected to the other part of your question. So try to keep your questions short and brief, and I will ask them to David, and he will answer them as much as he can. So welcome, Dr. David Coates.
Hello, everybody. I'm David. Up until last year, I was working with United Nations Environment Programme in the Convention on Biological Diversity, working particularly on the relationship between biodiversity and ecosystems and water. And I was heavily involved in UN water and the SDGs on water, and also was heavily involved in last year's production of the UN World Water Development Report, which was on nature-based solutions. So the topic of today's discussion is ecosystems. And I have to say, when I started, ecosystems to me is it's a very cross-cutting topic. So I hope that when you think about ecosystems and water, you don't compartmentalize it as a separate subject. It's really a subject that cross-cuts practically everything to do with water. And we can look at the relationship between ecosystems and water in different ways. One that looking at the impacts of water management on ecosystems, which is a serious problem. The current way in which we manage water has serious impacts on as a driver of biodiversity loss. The impacts of dams on rivers, for example. We can also look at it from the point of view of the impact of ecosystem loss and degradation on the water quality and availability. In other words, ecosystem degradation is caused by water use, but also ecosystem degradation is a significant factor in contributing to increasing challenges that we have in managing water. And very much as ecosystems in terms of how they work as solutions for water management challenges. In other words, how we can use what might be called nature-based solutions or green infrastructure, etc. And ecosystem-based solutions or nature-based solutions are basically using natural processes of ecosystems to meet water security challenges. And I think the key point on the ecosystems, in looking at the ecosystems in a positive way, the way in which they help us manage water better, there's a huge potential for improving the incorporation of this kind of approach in water resources management policies and actions. And nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based solutions are particularly important for solving water challenges in agriculture, for sustainable urban settlements, disaster risk reduction, and climate change adaptation. And currently, for example, if you look at the 2018 World Water Development Report, there's a nice section in there that points out that at the moment, we spend less than 1% of our investment in water on nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches. So there's huge potential for improving the benefits from improved management. So having said that, I'll open up and start answering some questions and look forward to some questions from you.
All right, thank you for that, David. We can start with a question from Camilo Martinez. He's writing, regarding obtaining energy from wastewater, have you ever heard about producing energy from the temperature gradient from wastewater, 15 Celsius, to average room temperature? Is this a useful example for heating?
I'm not an expert on wastewater as such. My expertise regarding wastewater is how to the impacts of wastewater on ecosystems, and also the great potential for improving ecosystem management to help us deal with the wastewater problems. Regarding energy extraction from wastewater, there would be considerable potential for that, because wastewater is usually, it depends on the kind of wastewater, but a lot of wastewater, particularly from urban settlements and from farming, is very high in nutrients. So there's potentially a source of organic gases such as methane, which can be used then for energy generation. But the specifics of it, I'm not an expert on it, but there is certainly potential there for improving energy extraction from wastewater.
Thank you so much for that, David. So Sergio De Campos is wondering, why do some experts keep on using the term wastewater reuse? He believes that it's a source of misunderstanding. If the water has been treated in order to be ready for reuse, is it not anymore waste then?
Well, that's certainly the case, and that's the point that most experts on wastewater have been making, that actually we should stop considering it as water that's wasted. It's only wasted because we do not manage it properly at the moment. Most wastewater is certainly wasted in the sense that it's thrown away or discharged, usually into the natural environment, which causes considerable problems. But what we want to do with the wastewater is consider it much more as a resource in several ways. Wastewater contains in many kinds of wastewater that are highly polluted, but those pollutants are highly useful. This particularly applies to nutrients, which can be recycled, and wastewater from farming, for example, or sewage from urban areas is very high in nitrogen and phosphorus. And with the right management system, that can be recycled and put back into farming so that we can reduce external applications of fertilizers and things like this. Also, wastewater can be treated effectively and reused. So what we're trying to do is move the whole wastewater problem towards looking at opportunities that wastewater presents for recovering nutrients and also for reuse of water. So it's no longer is seen as a waste. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that. Some students are saying that they cannot hear properly. Let us know if that continues. Anyway, so moving on. Next question comes from Olfa. She says that nature-based solutions usually help small communities to get their water supply. How could they be adopted for bigger cities, or are they not supposed to replace these great technologies for bigger cities then?
I'm sorry, breaking up a little bit there. Could you repeat that?
Olfa is wondering, she says that nature-based solutions usually help small communities to get the water supplies. How can they be adopted for bigger cities, or are they not are supposed to be replacing great technologies?
Yeah, I think I got that. I think I got the gist of the question. First of all, it's certainly the case that nature-based solutions are used extensively by small communities. It's certainly not the case, though, that nature-based solutions are limited to small-scale application. There are many examples where nature-based solutions are implemented by business, by local governments, by urban planners, by dam management people. It's large-scale application of nature-based solutions is already quite widespread, I would say, and there are significant opportunities for deploying nature-based solutions in urban settings in cities. And I would say that over the last 10 years, we've seen a significant increase in attention to that. Examples would be how to use sustainable urban drainage systems, or deploying vegetation up and down high-rise buildings for cooling effects. This idea that nature-based solutions are somehow mainly a small-scale application is essentially not it's not true. There are examples of large-scale applications of nature-based solutions. In some cases, the scale of application can be at the catchment scale. It can be, you know, in the orders of hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. Also, when there are cases where the application of a nature-based solution, and this applies especially in cities, each individual application is small scale. But when you do that many times in a city, you get huge cumulative benefits from the application of nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions is an approach which is multidimensional, it's multifaceted, it really includes a lot of things that people often do not think about as nature-based solutions. For example, I'm very keen on recognizing the application of nature-based solutions in farming, in agricultural systems, where improved land and soil management, for example, by farmers, helps us improve water retention in soils and therefore crop water availability. Each individual farmer's field, for example, might be, well, in developing countries, might be less than a hectare. Sometimes it's a quarter of a hectare. But when you do that with millions of farmers, you really get large-scale, landscape-scale application of nature-based solutions. So yes, local communities are very accustomed to using this, and it's very common that they do it, but it's becoming increasingly deployed now in other settings, in particular in urban areas. Thanks. I hope that's answering the question.
Thanks so much, David. Next question comes from Lisette Olivia. She wonders, is there any special concerns about female hormone pollution from contraceptives and hormone replacement with respect to ecosystem? And is there anyone already addressing these issues?
Yeah, quick answer to that is yes. I think one of the interesting things that's happening with pollution is that you know, the main pollutants that we have to deal with, whether it's in wastewater or in the general ecosystem, has been, well, the worst one has been always nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, mainly from farming. And then we went through a phase of serious problems from things like insecticides. But as pharmaceuticals develop, medical systems develop, we're finding increasingly that we're trying to get novel pollutants, new ones, and endocrine disruptors, as they're called, which originate from female contraception, is one of the more recent, I say recent one, it's probably been recognized as a problem for about 15 years. It causes problems in the environment. For example, one of the reasons why we know that this endocrine disruptors, or the female contraception byproducts entering the environment, is because it's created feminization in fish. It's one of the examples of how feedback about what's happening with biodiversity in the wild is telling us that there's a problem that we didn't know about before. And it was mainly a sex reversal in fish in the wild which alerted us to this problem of endocrine disruptors. To what extent this is a problem in the ecosystem, I don't think anybody actually knows. It's certainly a concern, but we have very limited data on what the actual long-term impact on the ecosystem is. But one would think that these kinds of pollutants getting into the environment is probably more of a problem for humans, actually. Just bear in mind that everybody in the world is taking their drinking water from the environment. One would imagine that there is a feedback mechanism there where humans also now are being exposed large scale to these kinds of chemicals and these kinds of pollutants. So it's not just a problem for the environment, it's a problem for humans as well. But yes, it certainly is a problem. Interestingly, one of the solutions for that is to use nature-based solutions, is to use ecosystem processes to deal with wastewater. There's a lot of evidence actually that bacteria in soils and in wetlands, etc., are actually much better at dealing with these pollutants than artificial wastewater treatment plants are. a nice section on that in last year's World Water Development Report. So nature is to some extent a solution for this problem, but we're not quite there yet in terms of solving the actual problem. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And it looks like Angela has finally connected. Welcome, Angela. We're very happy that you could join us. I'm sure everybody has a lot of burning questions for you.
I hope you can hear me as well.
Hi, Angela.
Yes, I can hear you. Angela? Now, yes, we can hear you. Can you say something? I think you're muted.
Hello?
Now, okay, now I can hear you. Great. All right, let's continue then. So, Fanny has a question. She says she would be interested in the trust and relationship between the UN and the countries' ministries which are carrying out the implementation of SDG 6 in their countries. Angela, maybe you would like to answer this one?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Fanny, she's wondering, she would be interesting to know more about the trust and relationship between the United Nations and the ministries of these countries, which are carrying out the implementation of SDG 6 in the respective countries.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you for the question. So the UN for each SDG 6 indicator has a custodian agency. And this custodian agency has an office that is in contact with countries, helping to implement SDG 6. So, for example, for SDG 6.1 and 6.2, it's JMP, or Joint Monitoring Program, that is led by UNICEF and WMO. So they are in contact with the country, helping them to collect data. This data is then analyzed and, proofread, let's put it like this. And then it's sent to the UN. And then this data is the data that is published in the UNSD database, the UN Statistics database. So the relationship of the UN with the countries is on the support of the implementation of each target within SDG 6, and also in the support of trying to do it in an integrated way. So there is this project, the UN Water Monitoring Integrated Initiative, that they are trying to help countries to reduce the burden on countries on these monitoring processes. So what would happen? Would happen that instead of having many people maybe collecting the same data in different ministries of the country, they would have one focal point that would distribute these questions to countries to be answered. And then this person would then send to UN this data. What happened for some of the SDGs was that, especially for the kind of new ones, so 6.3, which is about of wastewater treatment for industrial and domestic water, and for and water quality, those are new indicators. So countries were really at the beginning of this process of collecting this data. So in some cases, it was not possible this time to do a global baseline. But it doesn't mean that countries and the UN, they are not working. They just need to, there is indicators that they need some time more, especially the new ones. I hope that was clear.
Thank you so much for that. Well, in relation to that, we also have a question from Nadia, and she's wondering, why did so few countries submit data for the wastewater treatment assessment?
Yeah, it's linked to the previous answer, meaning that it's a new indicator. So even though some countries, they had the data, they needed to validate this data before it's being published within the UN system. So for now, the data used in the database was the data that was received by the UN, and the countries approved the value after the calculation, and then it was submitted. In the case of the industrial wastewater, it was a little bit more complicated because it's hard that countries have a structured database of their industries and the wastewater values, the efficiencies that these wastewater treatment plants they have. So the industrial wastewater treatment is right at the beginning. So there is a lot of fragmentation that needs to be prepared, that countries need to prepare in order to be able to answer to that. And in the case of the domestic wastewater, there is this, as this data was not collected previously, there was some delay also in this collection and in this validation of the data. That's why you see little data. It's adding to that, there is this estimation that only 20% of the wastewater all around the world is treated when we consider all the kinds of wastewater. So those numbers, they will be improved towards from now until 2030 because we're going to have more data. So we have also to take these estimates with care, with a pinch of salt, because in some cases, in some countries it's going to be better, other countries it's going to be worse. But the important thing is that the SDG 6.3 is going to bring countries to the awareness that it's important for their own development. So yeah, that's more or less.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on. We have a question from Musa. Is wondering, how do we build mitigation and adaptation measures to protect freshwater from salt intrusion in near coastal aquifers?
How do you mitigate saltwater intrusion into freshwater aquifers in coastal areas? Is that what we're saying?
Yes. How do you build mitigation and adaptation measures to protect freshwater from salt intrusion in near coastal aquifers?
I think that the problem with salinization of freshwater aquifers in coastal areas, it's caused by a number of things. The one that springs to mind most immediate to many people is actually sea level rise, but actually I don't think that's the main problem. The main problem is over abstraction of fresh water from aquifers, which is, if you like, drawing salt water into them. So, and then we have a problem with land management as well, which is allowing salts to get into aquifers from the surface. So I think that this is a good example of how ecosystems fits into this, because the main problem with sustaining aquifers, including water quality in aquifers, it's largely an ecosystems problem. It's poor ecosystems management that's causing the problem in the first place. And really the only way to rectify or to reverse that problem is through improved ecosystem management, better land management in coastal areas, and again, bringing freshwater withdrawals from aquifers within sustainable limits. Most withdrawals from most aquifers these days are not actually sustainable. They're over extracting, which is causing increasing problems with saltwater intrusion. It will get worse as sea levels rise, but I don't think myself that the big problem at the moment is sea level rise. I think it's the way in which these coastal areas are actually managed in terms of their ecosystem integrity. So the solution basically is improved ecosystem management in these areas and improved water resources sustainability. Hopefully that's an answer.
Thanks so much.
May I add to this one?
Sure, go ahead.
There is a specific case on Vietnam, the southern part of Vietnam, that is now having overexploitation of groundwater. And there is in that area as well huge textile industries like complex. And one of the works that they are doing with this complex is, well, first of all, you need to stop overexploiting water, because what is happening that then you facilitate the saline intrusion. And the government has said that they are going to phase out the groundwater use or the new groundwater licenses by 2020. It's not clear if it's really going to happen, but for sure, there is a role that governments have to play in controlling the wastewater, the groundwater that is used, and how it's explored. So in order also to enable communities to thrive, to survive, but also the economy to thrive and to grow, in order to also bring people out of poverty. So this is very, like, we need to reduce the groundwater abstraction, like at least keep it to levels that are sustainable, in order to be able to help these communities to achieve their own goals. And in that region particularly, there is a textile industry, but there is also the need to increase the livelihood standards of people. So there are many examples around the world of actions that are going to be are being done, and governments have a role to play.
If I also can add, again, bringing this conversation back to ecosystems where possible, it's not, and she's right, it's not simply about how much water we extract from aquifers, and certainly there's over abstraction going on at the moment. It's also about how we manage the system to allow water to recharge aquifers. And there's a lot of evidence that not only we are over extracting, but we're limiting recharge through land management practices. In particular, many farming approaches have encouraged water to run off from farmland across the surface and not recharge groundwater. And for example, by shifting land management practices so that water enters soil and trickles down through to recharge groundwater, is now been taken quite seriously in many areas. So we have in many aquifers improved our ability to actually recharge the aquifer through improved land management. Thanks.
Thanks so much to both of you. I hope that answered the question. Moving on, we have a question from Mona. She's wondering, is there any vision or solution to benefit from the parts of floods caused by climate change to the agricultural sector? Maybe a special infrastructure, perhaps?
Yeah, I saw that flash up in text earlier. Interesting question. Floods, climate change, agriculture. I think for the start, I would like to stress the point that I think that at the moment, and recently, most of our increased risk from flooding is actually coming from ecosystem changes and not from climate change. It's the way in which we manage land and coastal wetlands that's increasing risks that we have seen recently. It's certainly true that climate change is going to make things worse, but we need to have a much better understanding, for example, the way in which deforestation increases flood risk downstream, and therefore reforestation is a solution to improving or reducing flood risk. In terms of agriculture, certainly there are many areas where agriculture is very vulnerable to flooding. So worldwide, agriculture is much more vulnerable to water scarcity, drought, but there certainly is a problem with flooding in many areas. And again, this whole thing is seen from the point of view of, you know, agriculture, if you like, is the victim of increased flood risk. But in many areas, agriculture is actually directly contributing to increased flood risk because of the way in which agriculture is managing land. And I mentioned earlier, this tendency for the way in which we manage soils has increased runoff from land because the water runs off instead of entering the soils, and therefore if it runs off, it increases flood risk downstream. The solution basically to all of this is improved land management practices in agriculture. So on this whole topic of flood risk or water risk in agriculture, it's a two-way street here. Agriculture itself has in many cases increased risks, but also agriculture can play a large role in terms of reducing those risks and for its own benefits as well. It's not any use to a farmer if it rains and the water runs off. That's not what the farmer needs the water to do. The farmer needs the water to enter the soil and stay there in the soil and trickle down to recharge groundwater rather than runoff. So runoff from farming is not it needs to be avoided to the extent as possible. But I think that my opinion on climate change and flooding has been certainly that I think that climate change is making a risk that we already have more severe. It's not causing the risk in the first place. Most of the risks, I think, from flooding are caused by poor land and ecosystem management. Thanks.
Thanks so much, David. Angela, would you like to say anything on this? You're muted.
Okay.
No.
Just that I agree with David that in most of the cases, there's extreme events, they used to happen already, but now they're going to be more frequent. So this is one of the issues that we need to prepare. And on the and on the agricultural use of land, it's very important also to ensure that to reduce drought and also ensure that the water, when it rains, it stays in the ground. So nothing else to add.
Thanks so much to both of you. So moving on to the next question. Meseret is wondering, how can we manage the challenges of water scarcity because of water allocation and access to water, which can lead effect on the to the ecosystem functioning, especially in developing countries?
Water scarcity, yes, certainly a big problem. There's a lot that can be done on water scarcity by improving water use efficiency. And we had a conversation earlier about wastewater, for example. One of the ways in which we can reduce water scarcity is to reuse wastewater. One example, our management of water is extremely inefficient at the moment. Most urban water supplies are very leaky. Usually less than half of the water that's actually flowing through pipes and things makes it through to the taps of consumers. So there's a huge potential there for improving water use efficiency. A lot can be done in terms of basically changing the way in which we use water. Agriculture, for example, is, as you probably know, is at the moment using about 70% of the water that we take out from rivers and the environment. Meat production, for example, is extremely water use intensive. And we're drifting here into the topic of water footprints. A lot can be done in terms of looking at the water footprints of the goods that we consume and shifting societies more towards consuming more sustainably goods with a smaller water footprint. So I think to a large extent, it depends of course where you live, but by and large, I think with most people, this concept of water scarcity, it's a problem that we've created ourselves. Water does not necessarily need to be scarce in those areas. It's scarce because we mismanage it. And again, going back to farming, water scarcity is by far the bigger problem for agriculture. So most of our water use is for agriculture at the moment. And in any areas where water is scarce, agriculture is the first sector that gets hit by problems of water scarcity. And it's a huge worldwide problem, contributing to things like desertification, land degradation, big problem that we have. But a lot can be done in terms of, again, of improved ecosystem management. And I mentioned it twice already, mention it again, we can get farmers to improve their land management so that with the limited amount of rainfall that they get, you know, the rainfall is used much more efficiently on land and gets into soils and doesn't just evaporate off again. I don't have details, but there are, water scarcity is certainly a problem, but I think that there are many solutions to it based on improved ecosystem management and also improving water use efficiency and looking at water footprints and solutions of this kind of nature. Thanks.
So I will complement, when you look at new developments, so new cities and new factories and new agricultural areas, if any, one thing that people should assess is the risk of the area. So try to place factories in areas where the water risk is low could be a good solution. The water scarcity risk is low. It's a good solution. But also, as the industry use 20% of the water that we withdraw annually, I think it's very important to bear in mind that closed loop cleaner productions are actions that industries, they need to bring in every time more. And as David said, the reuse of wastewater is an important factor that needs to be included, especially when we think about new industrial plants that are being created all over Asia at this moment. So yes, increasing water use efficiency and considering wastewater as a resources, they are very important to face water scarcity in practical terms.
Thanks so much, both of you. Okay, next question from Jose Luis. What is the strategy to strengthen a nature-based solution and demonstrate that this is a confident solution?
I think strategy there. I think the question there is, I mean, whose strategy are we talking about? What particular context is this question? Is it us? Is it the UN system? Is it local governments? Is it national governments or whatever? I think, you know, the strategy will be to some extent different. I will give a perspective on this, though, that in my experience, having worked in water in various different ways for quite some time, probably at least 25 years, I've seen a significant shift in approach in the last 10 years towards being able to take on board and recognize the role of nature-based solutions. A really significant shift. 15 years ago, when we talked about water and the environment and ecosystems, I was, to be honest with you, quite depressed. But in the last 10 years, and in particular in the last 5 years, I've seen really leaps forward in the way in which we're trying to deal with the problem and trying to integrate nature-based solutions much better. My philosophy in all of this is, I think that our approach to water resources management is so bad that the only thing left to do now with water resources management is something sensible, which is to a much more widespread adoption of nature-based solutions. So I think that's the stage that we're at. So I don't feel a need at the moment to really push the nature-based solutions agenda. I think it's getting up there into the dialogue. It's getting into policies really quite rapidly. Cities, as an example, there's been a really significant increase in attention to this kind of approach in cities over the last 10 years. A real shift in funding. I think that one of the problems we have with this is now the attention is there. I think the scientists that are underpinning nature-based solutions now need to come to the table with much more information to be a lot more specific about when and where you can apply nature-based solutions and what exactly are the hydrological and economic benefits of these nature-based solutions, because some of them are not well assessed in terms of their impacts. As a general philosophy, nature-based solutions is great, but you need to be careful about when and where you actually apply them, because you can make mistakes, and we need much better tools, much better information to help engineers, basically civil engineers and urban planners and agricultural development people to better populate their arguments and their assessments with real and improved data on the efficiency of nature solutions.
David, you're breaking up. We can't hear you. I don't know if it's your connection. No, it sounds very far away. Your video is also breaking up.
Today is the day of the technical problems.
Yeah, today we're having a lot of technical problems. I don't know why. Maybe it's the weather. Sorry about that, everybody that's watching.
I just want to add one thing, that in the report that was in the reading materials, the 2018 report on nature-based solutions, one of the ways we said that people could that we could make people more confident, decision makers more confident about adopting nature-based solutions, was to increase the knowledge base in the education level, like trainings, people at universities, learning more about it, learning that it really works. And then these students, are they're going to get into more senior positions, they are going to be able to trust and sell and then implement more nature-based solutions. So that's also one of the tips we say in the report. So if you want more people implementing nature-based solutions, let's make it part of the curricula in university studies.
Thank you so much, Angela. David has signed off. Maybe he will connect later, hopefully. We'll just continue and do the best out of the situation. So next question comes from Nitesh. He wonders, can water reuse help with groundwater replenishment?
I suppose that he meant that when like wastewater, treated wastewater could help with groundwater replenishment. Yes. So it's a way to reuse wastewater is to use it to replenish aquifers. I'm not an expert on this area, on the replenishment of aquifers, but I know it's being used in California, and I watched at some point a video about that. So I would suggest, if David I think is connecting now, that I would suggest to Nitesh to have a look on that, because I know that they are using that in California.
David is back, but we don't have a video, David, only audio.
Maybe not even audio.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's continue. No, okay, now I think I see it. Hey, welcome back, David.
Hi, sorry, bit of a glitch there.
Yeah, no problem. Angela took over and she answered very eloquently. Yes, so maybe we can go on with the next question. I asked Angela from Nitesh. He wondered, can water reuse, treated wastewater, help with groundwater replenishment? And she gave her ideas on that. Do you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what she said, but I'm quite sure she said the right thing. She's very knowledgeable on these things. No, I don't have anything to add to that. I gave a whole speech about this. I gave a long talk about this whole thing about strategies for nature-based solutions and things. I won't repeat it, but on this reuse of wastewater, yes, certainly there's a lot of potential for that for reducing water scarcity. Where the wastewater eventually ends up, it depends what kind of wastewater we're talking about and where the wastewater is.
David, sorry, you're breaking up again. We can't really hear anything. No, we can't hear you at all. Yeah, all right, well, okay. Do you want to, David, do you want to try again? No. Sorry, David, we can't hear you. It's really breaking up. I don't know what's going on. Something's there's maybe a satellite, something's going on. I have no idea. Something definitely going on with Hangouts today. Well, let's blame Google. This is their fault. All right, well, let's just move on to the next question. We don't have a lot of time left, and we try to answer as many as possible. So Dr. Crichton Zazu wonders what kind of interventions are needed for Africa given its rapid urbanization rate and lack of capacity to manage wastewater. Angela, do you want to answer that?
I wish I would have the perfect answer for this question, then we could solve a lot of problems. But yeah, so assessing what is the rates of urbanization is very important, and we know that in most cases it's happening unplanned. So it's hard to predict if big systems like big wastewater treatment plants are going to be enough for the urbanization in Africa. What I would say is that even if each case is different, we should always consider the possibility of using the centralized systems, meaning that small communities can have a small wastewater treatment plant and then other communities as well, because it's very hard to predict how big those systems are going to be, and systems that are designed to huge capacity, they may go idle. Another thing that's important is that the system itself, it can handle different loads. Often biological systems are very good, especially in Africa where the weather is nice. So I think that whenever possible, having a good urban planning would be the ideal thing to start with. But when it's not possible, then yeah, going for small wastewater treatment plants is better than no wastewater treatment plants.
Thanks so much, Angela. All right, we have a question from Mohammed wondering what are the roles of non-water actors on ecosystems?
Oh, this is a pity that David's not here. But
Okay.
I think there is no such a thing as no water actors, because even if you think you were not a water actor, you're drinking water every day in your life, so you are a water actor somehow. So I would say that this is a lot about of what the 2030 agenda is talking, is that engagement of many stakeholders, and it means like different government levels, but also different within the population, like the private sector, academia, community-based, river basin communities. All of them need to be involved in planning the use of water for a basin. So this is one of the things. So consider yourself always a water actor and try to get involved in what's just going on in your community and your river basin. And then as a person, what you can do, you can select, for example, you can reduce your water consumption. As a person, you can decide to eat more or less meat, so your water footprint is going to be higher or lower. So there are those things that as a person you can do. But yeah, I think that we should avoid thinking that we are not we are, any of our actions in this very globalized world, it's so important for other sectors that we should always be aware of our impact, even though we don't mean it.
Thanks so much, Angela. David is back, thank God. Yes, great. David, yeah, I think we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about all of this.
No problem. I think I was saying that maybe there's a satellite that's broken or something. It's Google's fault, hopefully. So we had a good question, and from Mohammed, and Angela tried to answer it, but she said that you would actually be better at answering this. And Mohammed wondered, what are the roles of non-water actors on ecosystems? Do you want to say anything on that?
it's a good question. I'm wondering what you mean by a non-water actor. Presumably, you mean those people that are not directly whose job it is, if you like, is managing water. I think that, as Angela was saying, improved awareness really of people are actually aware of water problems. There's a water problem anywhere, people are aware of it. There's no lack of public awareness.
David, I think you're breaking up again. Sorry, we can't really hear you. I don't know what's going on today. Yeah, I think maybe we go on to the next question. Yeah, let's have a final question for you, Angela, and then we wrap up. So Donna is asking, it appears more challenging to adopt simple, cost-effective solutions such as nature-based solutions, and always looking at complex solutions that requires time and money. How do we change this perspective?
Yeah, that's what it seems like, and mostly because people and the designers, they trust more in this huge, big, gray kind of solutions. So there is the need to increase the awareness, and also the cases that show that nature-based solutions, that simple solutions, they can work. So in one hand, we need to have these solutions in place, scale up and show that they work, and then it's going to come as a consequence. But if you work in the water sector, so you're an official water actor, you can always try to, when you ask for an engineering firm a proposal, ask them to also explore nature-based solutions options, because often those are not the first things that get offered to who is going to implement a solution. So maybe that's why people go for more complex solutions, because they trust them more. And then we should maybe get the awareness of all the actors that there are simple solutions that can all work as well, and also provide co-benefits. Because if you, for example, if you have enough area and you decide to treat wastewater in a constructed wetland, they often use a lot of area, but they also are a green area that can serve, for example, for birds to nest and things like that. Even though if you talk to constructed wetland people, they won't like that much, but that's also a positive impact. Other than, of course, it's a plant. Maybe you can use the leaves for something, for some manual, for craft work. So there are many co-benefits that often they are not used in the calculation of the cost benefit of a solution. So that's also another thing. Maybe if we would be better able to sell the cost benefits that are associated to nature-based solutions, then more people would apply them.
Thanks so much, Angela. Well, I think we have already gone on for an hour now, and I think we have to wrap up. Again, sorry everybody for the technical issues. I have no idea what's going on today. Hopefully it will be better for the next session. I want to thank David, even though he's logged off, but I want to thank David so much. He took his time to answer your questions, and we're very happy to have him as a guest speaker. And again, also thank you, Angela, for joining us. I hope that the students are as happy as I am and as satisfied with the answers. And yeah, I want to remind everybody that we have another webinar on water governance with Dr. Maria Chelen and Dr. Alejandro Jimenez next Tuesday on the 12th, same time as today, 2 p.m. UTC. So everybody tune in, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon or morning wherever you are in the world. And again, thanks so much to Angela, and thank you to David, and goodbye everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.